In this lesson, we'll read an excerpt from The Open Boat and answer 2 written questions. Our first question will have to do with mood and how a simile affects the story's mood. And then we will be looking for how the setting develops our central idea. So we'll be paying close attention to setting and mood while reading this text. And you can find this text in the lesson video description at the bottom of the video description. I have a link to this Google PDF here. And I will begin. Wait, at first, I forgot one thing. We do have a little blurb at the top because it's an excerpt. So they give us a little blurb because they are starting us off somewhere not at the beginning of the story. And it tells us 4 men are afloat in a small boat or a dinghy, trying to make it to shore after their larger ship has sunk. None of them knew the color of the sky. Their eyes glanced level and were fastened upon the waves that swept toward them. These were waves that were these waves were of the hue of slate, save for the tops, which were foaming white, and all the men knew the colors of the sea. The horizon narrowed and widened and dipped and rose, and at all times its edges was jagged, with waves that seemed to thrust up in points like rocks. Many a man ought to have a bathtub larger than the boat which here rode upon the sea. These waves were most wrongfully and barbarously abrupt and tall, and each frothed top was a problem in a small boat navigation. The cook squatted in the bottom and looked with both eyes at the 6 inches of gunwale which separated him from the ocean. His sleeves were rolled up over his fat forearms, and the 2 flaps of his unbuttoned vest dangled as he bent to bail out the boat. Often he yelled, "God, that was a narrow clip." As he remarked it, he invariably gazed eastward over the broken sea. The oiler, steering with one of the 2 oars in the boat, sometimes raised himself suddenly to keep clear of water that swirled in over the stern. It was a thin little oar, and it seemed often ready to snap. The correspondent, pulling at the other oar, watched the waves and wondered why he was there. The injured captain, lying in the bow, was at this time buried in that profound dejection and indifference which comes, temporarily at least, to even the bravest and most enduring. Willy-nilly the firm fails, the army loses, the ship goes down. The mind of the matter of a vessel is rooted deep in the timbers of her, through the commanded for a day or a decade. And this captain had on him the stern impression of a scene in the grays of dawn, 7 turned faces, and later a stump of a topmast with a white ball on it that slashed to and fro at the waves, went low and lower and down. Thereafter there was something strange in his voice, although steady. It was deep with mourning, and a quality beyond oration or tears. "Keep her a little more south, Billy," said he. "A little more south, sir," said the oiler in the stern. A seat in this boat was not unlike a seat upon a bucking bronco, and by the same token a bronco is not much smaller. The craft pranced and reared and plunged like an animal. As each wave came and she rose for it, she seemed like a horse making at a fence outrageously high. The manner of her scramble over these walls of water is a mystic thing, and moreover at the top of them were ordinarily these problems in white water, the foam racing down from the summit of each wave, requiring a new leap, and a leap from the air. Then, after scornfully bumping a crest, she would slide and race and splash down a long incline, and arrive bobbing and nodding in front of the next menace. A singular disadvantage of the sea lies in the fact that after successfully surmounting one wave, you discover there is another behind it, just as important and just as nervously anxious to do something effective in the way of swamping boats. In a 10-foot dinghy, one can get an idea of the resources of the sea in line of the waves that is not probable to average experience, which is never at sea in a dinghy. At each slaty wall of water approached, it shut all else from the view of the men in the boat, and it was not difficult to imagine that this particular wave was the final outburst of the ocean. At the last effort of the grim water, there was a terrible grace in the move of the waves, and they came in silence, song for the snarling of the crests. In the wind light, the faces of the men must have been gray. Their eyes must have been glinted in strange ways as they gazed steadily astern. Viewed from a balcony, the whole thing would doubtlessly have been weirdly picturesque. But the men in the boat had no time to see it, and if they had leisure, there were other things to occupy their mind. The sun swung steadily up the sky, and they knew it was broad day because the color of the sea changed from slate to emerald green, streaked with amber lights, and the foam was like tumbling snow. The process of the breaking day was unknown to them. They were aware only of this effect upon the color of the waves that rolled toward them. This would show that they're pretty disorientated, actually. So with a story like this, we don't exactly have a climactic moment so much. Well, maybe if they got into their first night, and the oiler, that would be the name for a person on a ship who would do like, well, this one is saying that he's steering it, but you could say it was doing the ship maintenance person. Might have been the oiler doing work on the ship. And then the correspondent. So this story is told in third person narration, but Stephen Crane, the author, did have a boat accident like this. So some people will say that the correspondent is the focus of the story, and that is supposed to be Stephen Crane, who was on this trip and then it had this accident. And our paragraph we're supposed to be looking at was the one about the Bronco. So we have paragraph 9. And if you want to know what a Bronco would be, it'd be describing it as a bull. So the experience he is saying is similar to one of being on a bull riding. Well, you would be riding a bull. So you could say he's making the comparison to, obviously, riding a bull would be very unpredictable. And if we go here, back to our question, so we can think of some ideas for our question. The first thing you would want to do, obviously, is restate our question. So if you want to take a minute to answer, well, as much time as you need to answer question 39. So the first thing we would want to do is restate our question. Well, first we would want to make sure we answered the question. Now, when we go back, if we're talking about the extended simile, of course, making a fence outrageously high, the manner of her scramble over those walls is a mystic thing, and moreover, at the top of them were ordinarily these problems in white water, the foam racing down from the summit each wave, requiring a new leap and leap from the air. So this would be an example of a simile, because saying it is like, well, actually he uses unlike, but a comparison with like or as. So unlike also works with still identifying it as a simile. If he would have said a seat on this boat was a bucking bronco, that would have been a metaphor, but he said it was unlike a bucking bronco, not unlike a bucking bronco. And you could also say there's some personification here, saying that the waves are waiting, they're menacing them. The waves aren't exactly like a personal threat to them. It's just their general presence of the waves, right? So then moving on here, this would be our evidence there. We have the open boat is set in rough waters off the coast of Florida with the characters in a small dinghy boat. Paragraph 9 is showing the dangers of the waves and creates a fearful mood because the waves are continuing in a persistent manner. I could also use a quote here. I could say, then, after scornfully bumping a crest, she would slide and race and splash down a long incline and arriving, bobbing and nodding in front of the next menace. Bobbing and nodding would be similar to what the bull would do, right? So you could add a quote if you wanted to. And then you could say the quote reiterates the simile that the boat ride is similar to that of riding on a bull. And our final sentence there, in summary, the narrator uses a simile comparing the boat ride to a bull ride, which shows the frightening power of nature. And for our next question, you can take your time to answer, how does a description of the setting develop a central idea in excerpt from the open boat? And you will want to make sure you use your 2 details to support that response. Now, for this question, you would have to answer the setting. Well, you would have to say something about the setting, obviously, in terms of how it's developing a central idea. So your central idea is really just the message of a story. So after reading a story like this, the message is really pretty simple. You could simply say that the ocean is a dangerous place. I actually have 2 different central ideas here, okay? So it's 2 possible answers. So this one, we say our author's name. Stephen Crane uses a description of the setting to develop the central idea that the ocean is a powerful force that can threaten human life. The author sets a story in the rough waters off the coast of Florida and provides the characters with a very small boat, not fit for rough seas. In paragraph 2, Crane describes our boat as being no bigger than a bathtub. Then a bathtub. Then a bathtub, and the waves were barbarously abrupt and tall. This shows the unsuitable craft the men were attempting to survive in, thus building the central idea that the ocean's power is a threat to man. So I'm focusing here that the ocean is a threat to human life. That is whenever you have any question where they're trying to survive in nature somehow, you could always use a central idea that nature can pose dangerous, unpredictable risks to humans. No matter if it's a tornado, a snowstorm, in this case, they're lost at sea, any of those things. And then another one could be something along the lines of, the author uses a description of the setting to develop the central idea that the ocean is a dangerous place not suitable for human survival. The story is set up the coast of Florida in very rough seas, and the characters are in a small boat. While trying to find shore, the characters struggle to survive the rough seas, showing that human survival is nearly impossible on turbulent ocean waters. Now, this one would probably need one more. I would put a quote into this one to make it, because it does have the details. Well, you could really say that the detail is that they're off the coast in rough seas, and then the second detail is in a small boat. That technically is a detail. It's two details, but to make a stronger answer, I think it would be good to add one more detail. If you wanted to say, you could use a thing about the Bronco. The characters are frightened. Well, actually, you could say the thing about the captain being frightened, because the narrator makes a point to say that the captain was dejected and indifferent. So that shows us, usually captains in a ship are supposed to have these brave faces, but in this case, the captain's injured. So you could add something like that, adding to the central idea that something must have happened here that caused their bigger ship to sink and injured the captain. So those would be 2 written response questions for Stephen Crane's The Open Boat.